There's a hidden thread woven through history, one that connects us to a time when healing wasn't just science, but something deeper, something sacred. Picture this: a healer in ancient Egypt grinding rare herbs under the light of a full moon, or a shaman in the Amazon whispering to the spirits of the forest, drawing out remedies modern medicine is only now beginning to understand. These weren't just rituals, they were lifelines crafted over centuries and carried in the memories of those who knew the earth's secrets. Yet today, so much of this wisdom has slipped through the cracks of time, leaving us with fragments of a puzzle we're still trying to solve. What if I told you that some of the most powerful healing practices ever known are buried in the past, waiting to be rediscovered? This is the story of ancient healing practices and sacred remedies secrets lost in time, a journey into the heart of traditions that once saved lives, cured the incurable, and connected humanity to the natural world in ways we've long forgotten. Think about the last time you reached for a painkiller or a bottle of cough syrup. Now imagine a world where those remedies came not from a factory, but from the roots of a sacred tree or the petals of a flower harvested under the stars. From the opium poppies of Mesopotamia to the acupuncture needles of ancient China, these methods weren't just effective, they were woven into the very fabric of culture, religion, and daily life. But why did they disappear? Was it the march of progress or something more mysterious? The answers lie in the shadows of history, and that's where we're headed. Together, we'll trace the footsteps of healers who walked this earth thousands of years ago, uncovering the truths behind their remedies and the reasons they were lost. Some of these secrets were suppressed, others simply faded as the world changed, but their echoes remain, hidden in old texts, oral traditions, and even the practices of modern herbalists who keep the flame alive. By the end of this journey, you'll see the past not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing guide to a different kind of healing. So let's begin, because the deeper we dig, the more we realize how much we still have to learn. Long before pharmacies and clinical trials, healing was an art intertwined with the rhythms of nature and the mysteries of the unseen. Take Ayurveda, for example. This 5,000-year-old system from India didn't just prescribe herbs. It taught that health was a dance between three primal forces, or doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Imagine a healer diagnosing an imbalance not with blood tests, but by reading the pulse like a whispered secret from the body itself. Or consider the Greeks, who built sprawling temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine, where patients slept among sacred snakes, believing their dreams would reveal the cure. These weren't superstitions, they were systems honed over generations, observing how the body responded to plants, seasons, and even the stars. But here's what's fascinating: many of these ancient remedies hold up under modern scrutiny. Turmeric, used for centuries in Ayurveda to fight inflammation, is now studied for its potent antioxidant properties. Willow bark, chewed by Egyptian healers for pain relief, gave us the blueprint for aspirin. These discoveries weren't accidents, they were the result of meticulous observation, passed down through songs, stories, and symbols carved into temple walls. Yet somewhere along the way, as laboratories replaced herb gardens, we dismissed these traditions as folklore. Why? Part of it was the rise of industrialized medicine, but there's another layer. These practices demanded something modern life often lacks: patience, reverence, and a deep connection to the natural world. The abandonment wasn't universal, though. In remote corners of the globe, echoes of these traditions still thrive. Indigenous healers in the Andes still harvest coca leaves with rituals honoring Pachamama, the earth goddess. Tibetan monks preserve formulas for longevity in manuscripts hidden for centuries. These keepers of wisdom remind us that ancient healing wasn't just about curing disease. It was about sustaining balance in a world where humans weren't separate from nature, but part of its living breath. That's the real secret we've lost, the understanding that healing isn't just a physical act, but a sacred conversation with the world around us. The ancient Egyptians didn't just build pyramids, they constructed an entire medical legacy that rivaled their architectural wonders. Imagine walking into a temple not just to pray, but to be treated by a priest-physician who blended surgery, herbs, and sacred chants into a single healing ritual. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical text older than Homer's epics, reads like a modern doctor's manual, prescribing everything from celery for joint pain to acacia leaves to soothe inflammation. But what's truly staggering is how sophisticated their methods were. They stitched wounds with linen thread, set broken bones with splints, and even documented the pulse's connection to the heart centuries before the Greeks coined the term artery. Yet their brilliance wasn't just in technique, it was in their holistic vision. To them, a toothache wasn't just a cavity, it was a sign of imbalance, possibly caused by a wandering spirit or a curse. Remedies often combined practical ingredients like honey, a natural antibiotic, with spells invoking Thoth, the god of wisdom. Moldy bread applied to infections, hints at an accidental discovery of penicillin long before Fleming. But here's the mystery: if they were so advanced, why did so much of their knowledge vanish? Part of the answer lies in the very systems meant to preserve it. Sacred texts were guarded in temples, accessible only to elites, and when empires fell, those secrets were buried under layers of sand and time. Modern archaeologists still uncover fragments, a jar of preserved herbs in a tomb, a faded scroll hinting at a forgotten surgery. But the real loss isn't just the recipes, it's the mindset. Egyptian healers saw no divide between science and spirit. A remedy worked because it was both chemically potent and divinely blessed. Today, we're left piecing together their legacy, wondering what other breakthroughs might have been lost when Alexandria's library burned, or when tombs were sealed forever. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't just in their medicines, but in their belief that healing was a sacred dialogue, one we're still learning to hear. Deep in the heart of ancient India, healers didn't just treat symptoms, they listened to the whispers of the wind, the rhythms of the seasons, and the subtle energies flowing through every living thing. Ayurveda, born over 5,000 years ago, wasn't merely a medical system. It was a way of seeing the universe where every plant, every spice, even the air we breathed held the potential to heal or harm. At its core were the three doshas: vata, the force of movement like a breeze rustling through leaves; pitta, the fire of transformation, sharp as a midday sun; and kapha, the steady strength of earth, grounding and nourishing. Balance these and health flourished, disrupt them and disease took root. But what made Ayurveda truly extraordinary was its precision. Turmeric wasn't just a yellow spice, it was a warrior against inflammation, its golden hue symbolizing the sun's purifying power. Ashwagandha, dubbed the strength of a horse, didn't just calm the mind, it wrapped the weary body in resilience, much like the roots of the plant itself gripping the earth. Neem leaves, bitter and potent, weren't merely chewed for oral health. They were nature's antiseptic, a gift from the gods inscribed in sacred texts like the Charaka Samhita. These weren't random discoveries, they emerged from lifetimes of observing how a drop of ghee could soothe a burn, or how the scent of sandalwood might steady a racing heart. Yet history hasn't been kind to this wisdom. As empires clashed and cultures shifted, Ayurveda was pushed to the margins, labeled as folklore, diluted by colonial rule, or worse, reduced to trendy buzzwords on modern supplement labels. Imagine a centuries-old manuscript, its pages fraying, its recipes for longevity now repackaged as quick-fix teas and capsules. The irony, science is now racing to catch up to what Ayurveda knew all along. Studies confirm turmeric's curcumin fights inflammation better than some pharmaceuticals. Ashwagandha has stress-relieving properties rival prescription anti-anxiety drugs. But here's the real question. In our rush to validate these remedies, have we stripped them of their soul? The ancients didn't pop a neem tablet and call it a day. They harvested the leaves at dawn, chanting mantras to honor the plant's spirit. They prepared remedies under specific lunar phases, believing the moon's pull could amplify a herb's potency. This wasn't superstition, it was a recognition that healing was a sacred collaboration between human, plant, and cosmos. Today, as Ayurveda surges in popularity, we face a crossroads. Are we reviving a tradition or just skimming its surface? The answer might lie in the quiet villages of Kerala, where practitioners still diagnose by reading the pulse like a sacred text, or in the monasteries where monks preserve recipes not in labs, but in memory and ritual. Perhaps the deepest secret of Ayurveda isn't in the herbs at all, but in the understanding that true healing demands more than a pill. It requires patience, reverence, and the humility to remember that we are not conquerors of nature, but its students. Chinese medicine holds secrets that blur the line between science and poetry, where the human body becomes a landscape of flowing rivers and hidden currents, each with its own name and purpose. The Yellow Emperor's Classic, a 2,000-year-old text, doesn't read like a medical manual so much as a guide to cosmic harmony. It describes Kai not just as breath or energy, but as the invisible thread stitching together everything from the beat of a heart to the turn of the seasons. Picture a healer in the Tang dynasty pressing a finger to your wrist, not just to count pulses, but to listen for the subtle music of your organs, the liver's wood energy, the fire of the heart, the earth-like patience of the spleen. This wasn't metaphor, it was a map of life itself, and what a map it was. Meridians, those pathways of Kai, crisscrossed the body like secret highways connecting toe to tongue, fingertip to forehead. Acupuncture needles thinner than a hair weren't just tools, they were conductors redirecting the body's symphony. Herbs weren't merely ingredients, but characters in an epic story. Ginseng, the root of man, revered for its power to replenish Kai or rise he mushrooms, dubbed the mushroom of immortality, believed to calm the spirit and lengthen life. Even goji berries, now tossed into smoothies, were once carried by warriors to sharpen vision and fortify the blood. These weren't superstitions, they were the result of millennia observing how a bitter root could steady a trembling hand, or how a needle placed just so near the elbow might quiet a storm of nausea. Yet for all its sophistication, much of this knowledge slipped through the cracks of history. Wars, dynastic collapses, and the Cultural Revolution scattered or destroyed texts that might have held remedies we've yet to rediscover. Secretive masters took formulas to their graves, believing some cures were too potent to share freely. A recipe for dragon bone powder, made from fossilized remains, might have contained minerals modern science would recognize as calcium-rich. But the ritual of its preparation, the prayers whispered as it was ground, those nuances are lost. Today, researchers pore over surviving manuscripts, decoding cryptic terms like ghost needle technique or midnight noon ebb flow, wondering what practical genius they might still hold. The real tragedy isn't just the lost remedies, it's the lost philosophy. Traditional Chinese medicine never separated mind from body or human from environment. A cough wasn't just a symptom, it might signal a wind invasion needing herbs to anchor the lungs. Insomnia wasn't just sleeplessness, it could be a heart fire flaring, quenched by lotus seed or sour jujube. Modern labs now confirm ginseng's adaptogenic properties or acupuncture's ability to trigger endorphins, but these discoveries feel like echoes of a deeper truth the ancients grasped instinctively, that healing is about restoring balance, not just silencing symptoms. Perhaps the most tantalizing question isn't what was lost, but what might still be hiding. In the vaults of monasteries or the memories of rural elders, could there be formulas waiting to challenge our modern assumptions? A 19th century text mentions a black soup that reportedly mended broken bones in weeks. Was it legend or a recipe we dismiss too quickly? As scientists today race to mine TCM for the next big drug, they're grappling with a paradox. The very thing that makes these remedies powerful, their complexity, their roots in a holistic worldview, is what makes them hard to replicate in a pill. The ancients didn't just prescribe herbs, they prescribed seasons, emotions, even the direction one should face while taking them. So the next time you sip chrysanthemum tea to cool a headache, or feel the grounding weight of an acupressure stone, remember, you're touching a tradition that saw the body as a masterpiece of nature, one we're still learning to read. The scrolls may be faded, but their wisdom whispers on, if we're willing to listen. The stone steps of an Asclepian weren't just a pathway, they were a threshold between the world of the sick and the realm of the divine. Imagine walking into one of these Greek healing temples, the air thick with the scent of crushed bay leaves and the distant murmur of prayers. You'd leave offerings a clay figurine of the body part you hope to heal, perhaps then lie down in the abaton, a sacred dormitory where the god Asclepius himself might visit you in a dream. His serpent, coiled around a staff, would slither across your sleeping body, its touch said to dissolve tumors or mend shattered bones. To modern ears, it sounds like myth. But what if these rituals held a kernel of truth science is only starting to unravel? The treatments prescribed in these temples weren't just mystical theater. Patients drank from springs rich in minerals now known to soothe digestion. Herbal poultices of chamomile or myrrh, applied by priest-physicians, contained compounds we still use in antiseptics today. Even the act of dreaming, central to Asclepian healing, mirrors modern research on how the subconscious can influence physical recovery. Studies show placebo effects trigger real biochemical changes, and guided imagery can reduce pain as effectively as some drugs. The Greeks may not have understood neurotransmitters, but they grasped something profound. Healing begins in the mind as much as the body. Yet the rise of Hippocratic medicine, with its focus on observable symptoms and natural causes, pushed these practices into obscurity. The father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, famously dismissed temple healing as superstition. But here's the twist: some of his own remedies echoed temple wisdom. He prescribed willow bark tea just as the priests did, centuries before scientists isolated its pain-relieving salicin. The divide wasn't as stark as history suggests. Both traditions shared a reverence for nature's pharmacy. They simply framed it differently. What truly vanished with the Asclepians wasn't just the remedies, but the holistic experience of healing. Patients didn't just receive treatments, they underwent rituals that kindled hope. The flicker of oil lamps, the chant of hymns, even the weight of a warm stone placed on an aching joint, all conspired to convince the body it could mend. Modern hospitals, for all their technology, often lack this alchemy of environment and belief, yet traces remain. Hydrotherapy, once practiced in temple baths, is now a staple of physical rehab. The use of music to ease anxiety. The Greeks knew its power long before fMRI scans showed how melodies calm the amygdala. Perhaps the greatest lesson from these forgotten temples lies in their understanding of healing as a story. A patient wasn't just a collection of symptoms, but a protagonist in their own restoration, guided by symbols and dreams. Today, as researchers explore how narrative therapy can speed recovery, or how meditation alters gene expression, we're circling back to an ancient truth: the body listens to the stories we tell it. The Asclepians may lie in ruins, but their legacy lingers, not in the dust of fallen columns, but in the quiet realization that some cures defy textbooks, dwelling instead in the sacred space between belief and biology. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where the canopy blocks out the sun and the air hums with unseen life, a shaman prepares a brew that will unravel the mind. Ayahuasca, the vine of the soul, isn't just a drink. It's a portal to realms where illness reveals itself as tangled energy, and healing begins with confronting the unseen. The recipe is ancient: the vine Banisteriopsis copy, boiled for days with the leaves of Psychotria viridis, creating a concoction so potent it can induce visions that last for hours. But here's what modern science finds astounding. The vine contains harmala alkaloids, which not only open the mind to hallucination but also act as MAO inhibitors, allowing the DMT in the leaves to cross the blood-brain barrier. In other words, these shamans cracked the code to a biochemical key, one that laboratories only identified in the 20th century. Yet ayahuasca is just one thread in a vast tapestry of indigenous plant wisdom. Far to the north, the Huicol people of Mexico trek hundreds of miles to harvest peyote, a small, spineless cactus that blooms pink after rare desert rains. Chewing its bitter flesh isn't just a ritual, it's a communion with the divine, a way to see the heart of the world, as elders describe it. Modern research confirms peyote's mescaline can rewire neural pathways, offering breakthroughs for addiction and depression. Similarly, in West Africa, the Biwiti tradition uses iboga, a root so powerful it can halt opioid withdrawal in a single dose, a fact now fueling clinical trials for substance abuse treatment. But the real magic isn't just in the plants themselves, it's in the context. A shaman doesn't administer ayahuasca like a pill. The ceremony, the darkened maloca, the Icaro's healing songs, the strict dieta diet is as crucial as the brew. These elements prime the body and mind, creating a sacred container for transformation. Compare that to a Western lab where drugs are stripped of ritual, reduced to isolated compounds. The irony: science is now racing to replicate what shamans knew all along. That healing isn't just chemical, but psychological, even spiritual. The fragility of these traditions is heartbreaking. Many were nearly erased by colonialism, forced conversions, and land seizures. The Cherokees' use of pink root for parasites, the Soma's reindeer milk antibiotics, the Maoris' Kawakawa poultices countless remedies vanished when elders died without passing them on. Oral traditions, while resilient, are vulnerable. A single generation's disruption can sever a lineage stretching back millennia, yet hope flickers in unexpected places. In the Peruvian Amazon, young mestizo shamans are digitizing plant knowledge, blending ancestral wisdom with GPS mapping to protect biodiversity. Ethnobotanists partner with tribes, documenting cures in peer-reviewed journals, not to exploit but to preserve. Even Big Pharma, once notorious for biopiracy, now funds projects led by indigenous researchers. The question isn't just what we've lost, but what we might still reclaim. When a Matses elder shares the secret of a frog secretion that kills pain 100 times stronger than morphine, or a Navajo medicine person reveals a yucca root protocol for arthritis, it's a reminder these aren't relics of the past. They're living libraries, and the final chapters haven't been written. Perhaps the greatest lesson from shamanic traditions is humility. They remind us that nature isn't a warehouse of resources to plunder, but a teacher. The Amazonian shaman doesn't discover medicines. He asks permission from the plants, listens for their songs. in a world obsessed with speed and scale, that reverence might be the rarest remedy of all. Alchemy wasn't just about turning lead into gold. It was a desperate, dazzling quest to cheat death itself. Picture a dimly lit workshop in medieval Europe, where a robed figure grinds cinnabar into a fine red powder, convinced this scarlet mineral holds the key to eternal life. The air reeks of sulfur and ambition as he heats mercury in a glass vessel, watching silver droplets dance like liquid metal ghosts. To modern eyes, it looks like madness. But these experiments, fueled by equal parts mysticism and meticulous observation, were the birthplace of chemistry and a chapter in healing history we've barely begun to unravel. At the heart of it all was the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance rumored to heal any ailment and confer immortality. Some alchemists described it as a ruby-red powder. Others claimed it was a translucent crystal humming with inner light. Recipes for its creation were coded in symbols, dragons devouring their tails, suns and moons entwined. To protect secrets from the unworthy, one manuscript instructs the seeker to combine the green lion, likely sulfuric acid, with the blood of the red king, possibly gold chloride, then distill it 7 times under a waning moon. To the medieval mind, this wasn't pseudoscience, it was sacred geometry, a way to mirror the divine in matter. Enter Paracelsus, the rogue alchemist who tore up medical dogma in the 16th century. He dismissed ancient Greek theories about bodily humors and declared poison wasn't in the substance, but the dose, a principle still taught in pharmacology today. His traveling apothecary kit held everything from antimony for purging to opium for pain, but his real genius lay in bridging worlds. He treated miners' lung diseases with zinc, recognizing occupational health centuries before it became a field. He prescribed mercury for syphilis, unknowingly foreshadowing antibiotics, and his arcana, mysterious remedies made from metals and minerals, were precursors to modern chemotherapy. Yet his notebooks also brim with astrological charts and incantations, proof that for him, the line between laboratory and altar was thin as a hair. What's haunting is how close some alchemists came to breakthroughs they couldn't comprehend. When they dissolved gold in aqua regia, creating a shimmering liquid that could be reconstituted into pure metal, they were demonstrating metal's atomic nature, a concept chemistry wouldn't formalize for 300 years. Their obsession with purification, with reducing substances to their essence, mirrors modern drug isolation techniques. Even their failures were instructive. The alchemist who died breathing arsenic vapors left behind notes warning of invisible demons in the fumes, a grim but accurate description of toxicity. But the greatest loss isn't the failed elixirs. It's the manuscripts burned as heresy, the formulas scribbled in cipher and lost to war or time. The Ripley Scroll, a 6-meter-long illustrated recipe for the Philosopher's Stone, ends with a tantalizing gap where the final ingredient should be. The Voynich manuscript, filled with unreadable script and drawings of unknown plants, might hold medicinal secrets we'll never decode. And what of the alchemists who worked in silence, their discoveries buried with them? One Arabic text mentions a water of life, distilled from roses that healed wounds overnight. Could it have been an early form of antiseptic? Today, we smirk at their quest for immortality, yet we chase the same dream in gene therapies and cryonics. The irony is thick. Modern labs use gold nanoparticles to target cancer cells, fulfilling alchemy's vision of healing metals. Psychedelic research revisits Paracelsus's belief that the dose makes the poison and the cure. Perhaps the real Philosopher's Stone was never a substance at all, but the stubborn human faith that death isn't the end of the story. As we peer into Petri dishes and particle accelerators, we're still asking the alchemist's ancient question: What if the secret to life isn't just to endure, but to transform? The flames that consumed the Library of Alexandria didn't just burn parchment, they erased entire worlds of wisdom. But that legendary fire was just one of countless acts of destruction that robbed humanity of medical knowledge we'll never recover. Picture the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a 9th-century beacon of learning where scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic, preserving remedies from 3 continents. Its halls held scrolls on everything from cataract surgery to the medicinal uses of cinnamon and cloves. Then, in 1258, the Mongols sacked the city, throwing so many books into the Tigris River that the water ran black with ink for days. Historians still debate what was lost, perhaps early descriptions of germ theory or herbal compounds that could have reshaped modern medicine. Equally tragic were the quiet disappearances, the slow decay of knowledge in forgotten corners. Byzantine hospitals kept meticulous records of surgical techniques, including early anesthesia using sponges soaked in opium and mandrake. But when Constantinople fell in 1453, many of those manuscripts were used as fuel or lost to looters. In Europe, monastic libraries painstakingly copied ancient texts, only to see them destroyed during the Reformation, their pages repurposed as stuffing for bookbindings or lining for vegetable crates. Even the Mayans, whose bark paper codices detailed treatments for everything from snakebites to spiritual ailments, watched Spanish conquistadors burn their libraries in the name of erasing pagan superstition. The fragments that survive haunt us with glimpses of what might have been. A single charred page from Alexandria mentions a black honey from Cyprus that healed infected wounds, likely an early antibiotic derived from fermented figs. A surviving Arabic manuscript describes a surgeon removing bladder stones through an incision so precise, patients walked the next day. And then there's the mystery of the green copper, a substance mentioned in multiple texts as a cure for eye diseases, now lost to time. Was it malachite, verdigris, or something else entirely? We may never know. Modern technology offers glimmers of hope. Multispectral imaging can sometimes reveal text beneath layers of ash or mold, like the hidden recipes found beneath a palimpsest in a Sinai monastery. Archaeobotanists analyze residue in ancient jars, identifying long-forgotten herbs and resins. But no amount of scanning can reconstruct the oral traditions, the songs, the chants, the hands-on teachings that never made it to parchment. A healer in 10th century Persia might have known 1,000 plant properties by heart, passed down through generations, only to have that lineage broken by war or migration. The greatest loss isn't just the cures themselves, but the way of thinking they represented. These libraries weren't mere collections of facts. They were conversations across centuries, where a Roman physician's notes on willow bark might inspire an Arab alchemist's distillation technique, which in turn influenced a medieval monk's tonic. Each erasure didn't just destroy knowledge, it shattered a chain of inquiry, leaving us to rediscover truths the ancients already knew. When we mourn the burning of Alexandria, we're mourning something deeper, the silence left where voices once traded secrets across time. And yet, even now, a scrap of papyrus or a clay tablet might surface, whispering a remedy we've spent 1,000 years trying to remember. Secret societies didn't just guard political plots, they hoarded remedies powerful enough to heal kings and commoners alike. The Rosicrucians, cloaked in their emblem of roses and crosses, weren't merely philosophers debating alchemy in candlelit chambers. Hidden within their coded manifestos lay recipes for elixirs said to cure everything from melancholy to the plague. One encrypted text, the Book of M, describes a golden tincture made from sun-infused metals that could renew the humors of the body, a formula modern researchers suspect might have been an early form of colloidal gold, now studied for its anti-inflammatory properties. But why the secrecy? Because knowledge was power, and in an era where a single healing triumph could sway empires, these groups knew some truths were too potent to share openly. Midwives faced a darker reality. A woman in 16th century Europe grinding foxglove into a paste to slow a racing heart wasn't just a healer, she was a target. Her remedy, now known to contain digitalis, a compound used in modern heart medications, might save a life one day and earn her a witch's pyre the next. The line between medicine and magic was perilously thin, and so these women buried their wisdom in riddles. A rhyme about fingers of the fairy glove, passed between generations, wasn't just folklore. It was survival, a way to preserve life-saving knowledge under the radar of inquisitors. Some of their cures still surface in unexpected places, like a family in the Pyrenees who, until recently, kept a handwritten book of herbal blends locked in a chest, its pages stained with wine and secrecy. Then there were the apothecaries of Venice, who operated behind masks literally. Members of the Venetian Guild of Pharmacists wore elaborate disguises to protect their identities as they traded in rare spices and resins from the Silk Road. Their ledgers, written in cipher, listed ingredients like dragon's blood, actually a tree resin with clotting properties, and unicorn horn, often narwhal tusk, rich in calcium. But buried among the myths were genuine breakthroughs, a salve of turpentine and beeswax that prefigured antibiotic ointments, or a distillation of willow bark that mirrored aspirin centuries before its official discovery. The Guild's greatest secret wasn't any single recipe, it was their network of spies and smugglers who ensured these substances reached only the right hands. What's chilling is how much may still be hidden. In the vaults of old estates, behind the false backs of antique cabinets, or in the oral traditions of families who fled persecution, who knows what remedies lie dormant? A 20th century historian once stumbled upon a diary in a Scottish manor, its margins scrawled with notes about a moss that stilled the shaking sickness, possibly an early treatment for epilepsy lost when the family line died out. Another clue surfaces in a Freemason's letter from 1789, mentioning a green syrup used to treat battle wounds during the American Revolution, its ingredients known only to a select few. The tragedy isn't just the lost cures, but the fear that forced them into shadows. Imagine how many lives might have been saved if knowledge had flowed freely instead of being hoarded or hunted. Yet even now, echoes persist. In rural Portugal, a few elderly women still whisper the 7-herb prayer over bronchitis remedies, their hands moving in patterns taught by great-grandmothers who feared the priest's knock at the door. And in a quiet corner of Bavaria, a monk tends a garden of forbidden plants, their uses recorded in a ledger he'll only show to those who ask with the right heart. These keepers of secrets remind us that healing was once a trust as sacred as any religion, and that some doors to the past aren't fully closed, just waiting for the right key. Ancient medicine wasn't always a beacon of wisdom. Sometimes it was a cautionary tale of good intentions gone horribly wrong. Take the Roman obsession with lead, for example. Their prized cerasa, a white lead paste, smoothed noblewomen's skin and brightened their complexions, but at a terrifying cost. Little did they know, every dab was slowly poisoning them, leaching into their blood and attacking their nervous systems. Even their aqueducts, engineering marvels that they were, often channeled water through lead pipes, turning a basic necessity into a silent killer. The irony. They praised lead's sweet taste, unaware it was stealing their vitality drop by drop. Then there were the Chinese alchemists who swore by mercury elixirs, convinced this shimmering liquid metal could grant immortality. Emperors like Qin Shi Huang drank it eagerly, only to succumb to its toxicity. His tomb, guarded by terracotta warriors, may also hold rivers of mercury, a final testament to his fatal faith. Even the great Taoist alchemist Ji Hong, who meticulously documented herbal remedies, couldn't resist mercury's allure, calling it the quintessence of the moon. Centuries later, modern toxicologists would confirm what the ancients missed. Mercury doesn't prolong life. It shatters the mind and body, one tremor at a time. Yet perhaps no practice was as chillingly widespread as bloodletting. From the halls of Hippocrates to the chambers of 19th-century physicians, the belief that draining blood could rebalance the body's humors persisted for 2,000 years. George Washington's death is a grim reminder. Doctors bled him relentlessly for a sore throat, removing nearly half his blood volume in a single day. And then there's trepanation, the art of drilling holes into skulls to release evil spirits. Skeletons from Neolithic times to the Renaissance bear the scars of these crude surgeries, some showing signs of healing, others not so much. The question isn't just why these methods endured, but how. Part of the answer lies in the limitations of their time. Without microscopes or biochemistry, how could they know lead caused gout or mercury-induced psychosis? When a patient recovered after bloodletting, likely from unrelated causes, it reinforced the myth. Authority played a role too. Galen's theories dominated European medicine for centuries, his errors copied like scripture. And let's not underestimate the power of desperation. Facing plagues or chronic pain, even a dangerous chance at relief outweighed the terror of suffering. But buried in these grim stories are lessons sharper than any trepanation drill. They remind us that medical progress isn't linear. It's a winding path littered with hubris and revelation. The same cultures that poisoned themselves with mercury also pioneered acupuncture. The physicians who bled patients dry were the ones who first mapped the circulatory system. Their failures weren't just mistakes, they were stepping stones, teaching us to question, to test, to look deeper. Today, as we grapple with unproven supplements or the opioid crisis, history whispers a warning. Even the most revered remedies can hide shadows. The real breakthrough isn't never erring, it's learning at last to admit when we're wrong. The night sky wasn't just a canvas of stars to ancient healers, it was a living, breathing blueprint for the human body. Babylonian physicians would never dream of treating a fever without first consulting the position of Jupiter, believing its alignment could amplify or weaken a remedy's power. In their world, every herb had a planetary ruler. Mint pulsed with the energy of Venus, while iron-rich plants like nettle answered to Mars. Even the act of harvesting wasn't left to chance. The famous Greek physician Galen insisted on gathering valerian root when the moon was in Scorpio, convinced the constellation's watery influence heightened its sedative properties. This wasn't superstition to them, it was science, as logical as checking a thermometer. Medieval Europe took this cosmic thinking to vivid extremes with the zodiac man, an illustration mapping each body part to a star sign. Aries governed the head, so headaches were treated during the ram's astrological season. Taurus ruled the throat, making bull-shaped amulets popular for sore voices. But the most startling application was in bloodletting, a practice we now know was dangerous, yet was once performed with celestial precision. Surgeons would wait for the moon to wane, believing its shrinking light would reduce bleeding. Modern analysis of old medical records reveals a chilling pattern. Patients bled during full moons had significantly higher mortality rates. Coincidence? Or did the ancients detect a lunar pull on bodily fluids we're only beginning to measure? Fast forward to a 21st century lab, where researchers track emergency room admissions and discover more cardiac arrests occur during new moons. Sleep studies show people take longer to fall asleep and experience less deep sleep in the week surrounding a full moon, even when shielded from moonlight. Botanists document how plants alter their water uptake with lunar phases, a phenomenon farmers have exploited for millennia. Suddenly, the idea that celestial rhythms might nudge human biology doesn't seem so far-fetched. The difference is in the interpretation. Where Babylonians saw God steering fate, modern science probes for gravitational subtleties or shifts in Earth's electromagnetic field. Yet the real mystery isn't whether the stars affect us, it's why we stopped looking up. Traditional Chinese medicine still considers solar terms when prescribing herbs, and Ayurvedic practitioners time treatments around planetary transits. Meanwhile, Western medicine largely dismisses these connections as folklore, despite growing evidence that circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock, are deeply sensitive to light cycles. Perhaps the ancients weren't wrong about the cosmic link, they just framed it in the language they had. When a shaman says Saturn's return brings joint pain, and a rheumatologist notes arthritis flares in winter, aren't they observing the same pattern through different lenses? The irony is thickest when you consider chemotherapy. Oncologists now schedule treatments based on circadian science to minimize side effects, a practice called chronotherapy. It turns out cancer cells, like wheat in a field, have cycles of vulnerability. This cutting-edge approach would have made perfect sense to an Egyptian priest-physician timing a remedy to the rise of Sirius. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes. The cosmos whispers to our cells in a language we're only starting to decode. The real question isn't whether the ancients were right, it's what else they knew that we've yet to rediscover. Scattered across the globe, hidden in rainforests and mountain valleys, are plants with powers that seem plucked from legend. Take the willow tree, its bark chewed by ancient Sumerians to ease pain, later brewed into teas by Hippocrates, a remedy that simmered in folk medicine for millennia before chemists isolated its magic molecule, salicylic acid, the foundation of aspirin. Or consider ephedra, a wiry shrub Mongolians called the heart of the camel, used for 6,000 years to clear lungs and sharpen focus. Modern labs would later identify its active compound, ephedrine, now a staple in decongestants. These aren't just lucky guesses, they're proof that indigenous knowledge often mapped nature's pharmacy long before microscopes revealed why it worked. Yet for every willow or ephedra celebrated by science, there are hundreds of botanicals still whispering their secrets. In the misty highlands of Peru, the Quechua people brew muña mint to banish altitude sickness, its menthol-like oils expanding constricted airways. Australian Aboriginal elders crush kangaroo apple leaves into poultices that heal burns with shocking speed, possibly due to undiscovered anti-inflammatory compounds. Even Europe's forgotten weeds hold surprises. The humble stinging nettle, despised by gardeners, was once a medieval remedy for arthritis, its tiny hairs delivering formic acid, a natural pain blocker now studied for joint therapies. The urgency to document these traditions has never been greater. With every elder who passes without sharing their knowledge, entire lineages of healing vanish. Ethnobotanists like Dr. Mark Plotkin, who spent decades with Amazonian shamans, describe racing against a quiet apocalypse of disappearing languages and habitats. One heartbreaking example, the Javaro people of Ecuador knew a vine that could dissolve kidney stones, but the last shaman who mastered its use died before transmitting the full recipe. Now, researchers comb through his notes, hoping a single overlooked detail might unlock the secret. What makes this loss even more tragic is how close we might be to breakthroughs. The Madagascar periwinkle, once a folk remedy for diabetes, yielded vinblastine and vincristine, two of the most potent cancer drugs ever discovered. Its flowers, dismissed as weeds until the 1950s, now save countless lives. Similarly, the bark of the African peach tree, used by traditional healers for millennia, was recently found to contain compounds that target drug-resistant malaria. Who knows how many other lifesavers grow unnoticed in backyards or sacred groves? Modern technology offers a glimmer of hope. Drones map remote forests where rare plants thrive, while AI cross-references indigenous names with chemical databases to predict promising species. In Brazil, scientists partner with the Yanomami to create living libraries, gardens where medicinal plants are cultivated alongside recordings of elders explaining their uses. But the real challenge isn't just finding these plants, it's honoring the wisdom that accompanies them. A Shipibo healer doesn't simply pick a leaf, she sings to the plant, harvests it at dawn when its spirit is most awake, and prepares it with prayers. Strip away that context and you might miss half its power. So the next time you pop an aspirin or sip peppermint tea, pause to consider. These everyday comforts are threads in a vast, fraying tapestry of knowledge. Behind each one lies generations of observation, trial, and reverence for the green world. As we peer into petri dishes and chromatographs, let's not forget that the next miracle drug might not come from a lab's flash of genius, but from the memory of a healer whose name we'll never know, whispering to the roots of a forgotten flower. The Silk Road hummed with more than camel caravans and clinking porcelain. It carried secrets of healing across continents, each stop adding another layer to the tapestry of medical wisdom. Picture a Persian physician in Samarkand, unrolling a silk scroll covered in both Greek and Sanskrit, comparing Hippocrates' theories of the four humours with Ayurvedic doshas, searching for patterns in how distant cultures explained fevers or fatigue. Or imagine a Chinese herbalist in Chang'an, trading ginseng for frankincense, discovering that the resin prized by Roman emperors for temple offerings could also soothe inflamed joints when ground into a paste. This wasn't just commerce, it was the world's first global medical conference lasting centuries. But the real marvel was the synthesis. In Baghdad's House of Wisdom, scholars translated Indian texts on cataract surgery into Arabic, while scribes annotated Greek manuals with marginal notes about Tibetan pressure points. A single manuscript from the era might prescribe Greek honey salves for wounds alongside Chinese moxibustion for digestion, bound together with Persian bindings. The Silk Road didn't just move knowledge, it remixed it, creating hybrids like the Aygır tradition that blended Turkish bone setting with acupuncture meridians. Even now, the echoes linger. Modern Central Asian healers use copper bowls for cupping, a technique that's part Egyptian, part Mongolian, and wholly irreplaceable. Yet for every recipe that survived, countless others crumbled into oblivion. When Mongol armies sacked cities like Merv and Nishapur, they didn't just burn libraries, they severed the living chains of apprenticeship where masters taught students to pulse read like the Chinese, bleed like the Greeks, and diagnose by urine color like the Byzantines. The famous blue balsam of Bukhara, said to heal burns without scarring, vanished when its last maker died without heirs during the Black Death. A Tang dynasty scroll mentions a Sogdian ointment that made broken bones knit like new wool, but its ingredients are now just a list of untranslatable words. The cruelest loss might be the simplest, the conversations that never happened. What if a Nestorian monk carrying Syrian myrrh had shared his knowledge with a Tang pharmacologist studying ginger's effects on digestion? Or if the Venetian merchants who traded for Armenian bole, a clay used to stanch bleeding, had recorded the mountain elders' techniques? These missed connections haunt medical history. We know, for example, that Tibetan physicians used mercury compounds to treat infections, while Arab alchemists distilled mercury for purification. Had their paths crossed, might they have stumbled on antibiotics centuries early? Today, archaeologists sift through Silk Road ruins for clues. A scrap of paper from Turfan lists a black pill for stomach pain, its ingredients fused into an unreadable lump. A mural in Dunhuang shows a healer holding what looks like a syringe. Could it have been used for early inoculations? The answers are as buried as the cities themselves. But perhaps the greatest lesson isn't about what was lost, but what almost was, a medical tradition without borders, as fluid as the caravans that carried it. In an age where we're relearning the value of holistic, integrated care, the Silk Road's ghost whispers a question. How much further might we be if its wisdom hadn't slipped through our fingers like sand? The streets of 14th century Europe were a waking nightmare, cobblestones slick with the waste of the dying, church bells tolling endlessly for the dead, and the ceaseless cry of "Bring out your dead" echoing through plague-blackened alleys. Yet in this chaos, healers scoured libraries and oral traditions for any weapon against the Black Death, resurrecting remedies both brilliant and bizarre. Venetian health officials, desperate to halt the spread, revived an ancient Byzantine practice, isolating ships for 40 days before allowing dock access. The word quarantine comes from the Italian 40 giorni, 40 days, a number chosen not at random, but because Hippocrates himself noted it as the critical window for contagion to manifest. And it worked. Cities that enforced strict quarantine saw death rates plummet, proving that even in the Middle Ages, observation could outpace superstition. Herbal fumigation became another lifeline. Physicians stuffed masks with lavender, cloves, and rosemary, not just to mask the stench of decay, but because these aromatics contained compounds like eugenol and camphor, now known to repel fleas that carried the plague bacteria. In Avignon, the Pope's personal physician burned juniper branches in sick rooms, unaware their smoke contained antiseptic oils. Meanwhile, Persian doctors prescribed a paste of crushed emerald and honey, scoffed at by Europeans, yet modern studies reveal trace amounts of bismuth in certain green stones do have antimicrobial properties. But for every glimmer of insight, there were dead ends. Amulets inscribed with magical symbols sold for fortunes, their wearers dying just as swiftly as the unprotected. Potions of powdered unicorn horn, usually narwhal tusk or virgin's tears, lined apothecary shelves, their cellars growing rich while corpses piled high. The line between remedy and racket was perilously thin. What's truly baffling isn't the failed cures, but how many effective ones vanished once the terror passed. After the plague receded, Venetian quarantine logs were shelved and forgotten until the next outbreak. The meticulous herbal protocols of Moorish Spain, where hospitals used mint-infused bandages to prevent infection, were burned as pagan knowledge during the Inquisition. Even the simple act of washing hands, noted by Jewish physicians as protective, was dismissed for centuries as unnecessary. The pattern repeats throughout history. Panic drives innovation, comfort breeds forgetfulness. We discard what worked because surviving feels like victory, not a warning. The plague taught us that contagion travels with people, yet it took 600 years and a pandemic of our own to relearn the value of lockdown. Those medieval herbal masks, their principles resurfaced in 2020 when studies confirmed certain essential oils do disrupt viral envelopes. The tragedy isn't just the lives lost to the plague, but the lives lost because we refused to remember. Perhaps the real lesson lies in the quiet notes of a Florentine doctor named Tommaso del Garbo, who scribbled in the margin of his plague journal, "The remedies are all here if only we dare to keep looking." His words gather dust in a library now, beside the very cures we'll need next time. Alchemy's shadow stretches far beyond dusty manuscripts and cryptic symbols. It pulses through the veins of modern medicine in ways most of us never notice. Take the humble tincture, that amber liquid in dropper bottles at health stores. The process of steeping herbs in alcohol to extract their active compounds. That's pure alchemy, perfected by medieval practitioners who called it spagyrics, a blend of the Greek words for separate and combine. Paracelsus, the rogue alchemist physician, was obsessed with this method, insisting that dissolving plant essences in quintessential spirits, what we'd now call ethanol, unlocked their true healing potential. Fast forward to today, and scientists use nearly identical techniques to isolate everything from digitalis for heart disease to paclitaxel from yew trees for chemotherapy. The tools have gotten sleeker, but the principle remains unchanged. Extraction transforms raw matter into medicine. Then there's dosage, that fine line between remedy and poison. Alchemists didn't just stumble upon this idea, they worshipped it. Their manuscripts overflow with warnings about measuring, not by weight but by virtue, recognizing that a grain too much could turn gold into death. Modern pharmacology's entire foundation rests on this same razor's edge. Consider warfarin, a blood thinner derived from spoiled sweet clover. Too little and clots persist, too much and patients bleed uncontrollably. The alchemist's meticulous scales have simply been replaced by micrograms and molar concentrations, but the dance between efficacy and toxicity is the same ancient waltz. Even the symbols we take for granted whisper of alchemy's legacy. The serpent-twined bowl of Hygeia, emblem of pharmacies worldwide, isn't just a nod to Greek myth. It's a direct descendant of the Ouroboros, the alchemical serpent devouring its tail, symbolizing eternal renewal. And that mortar and pestle on your prescription label, it mirrors the vessels alchemists used to grind cinnabar or sulfur, believing physical transformation could mirror spiritual purification. But the most startling connection lies in chemotherapy. The first modern chemotherapeutic agent, arsenic trioxide, was literally rediscovered from an ancient Chinese alchemical text. Used for centuries to treat fevers, it was dismissed as superstition until researchers realized it could send certain leukemias into remission. Now, platinum-based drugs like cisplatin, descendants of alchemy's obsession with noble metals, zap cancer cells by binding to their DNA, much like medieval elixirs sought to fix corrupted bodily metals. The irony is rich. What we once mocked as pseudoscience laid the groundwork for clinical trials. Alchemists were the original experimentalists, recording failures and successes with obsessive detail. Their insistence on reproducible results, even if framed in terms of planetary alignments, paved the way for evidence-based medicine. So next time you see a pharmacist measuring liquid morphine with precision or a lab technician distilling plant extracts, remember, you're witnessing alchemy's living lineage, not as magic, but as something even more extraordinary, science that works. A physician in ancient China didn't need a stethoscope to hear your heart's secrets, just 3 fingers pressed to your wrist, listening for the subtle symphony of pulses beneath your skin. Each position corresponded to a different organ, and the rhythm told a story. A wiry pulse might reveal liver stagnation, while a slippery one hinted at dampness in the spleen. Across the Himalayas, Ayurvedic healers developed an equally intricate language of the tongue, mapping its cracks, coatings, and colors to imbalances in the doshas. A white coating signaled excess kapha, while a red tip blazed with pitta's fire. These weren't hunches, they were systems refined over centuries, turning the human body into a living textbook where every quiver and hue held meaning. But the most surprising diagnostic tool might have been dreams. In the temples of Asclepius, patients slept in sacred chambers, believing their visions would reveal the root of their illness. A dream of flooding rivers might prompt a prescription for diuretics, while nightmares of suffocation could lead to chest examinations. Modern sleep science now confirms that dreams can reflect physical distress. Heart disease patients often report dreams of choking before diagnosis, and migraines frequently announce themselves in vivid, unsettling imagery. The ancients weren't just guessing, they were pioneers of psychosomatic medicine, recognizing that the body speaks in symbols long before symptoms appear. Urine told its own tales. Medieval European physicians poured patient samples into elaborate glass flasks, judging diseases by color, sediment, even taste, a practice called uroscopy. Diabetes earned its name when healers noticed the sweet urine of sufferers, dubbing it the honeyed sickness. Tibetan doctors took it further, observing bubbles in urine to diagnose kidney disorders, a method surprisingly aligned with modern proteinuria tests. These techniques seem crude until you consider their legacy. Today's urine dipsticks are just high-tech descendants of the same observational wisdom. What's startling is how often these old methods hold up under scrutiny. Research shows trained Ayurvedic practitioners can identify prediabetes from tongue analysis nearly as accurately as blood glucose tests. Pulse diagnosis, once dismissed as folklore, now intrigues cardiologists studying how arterial waveforms reflect heart health. Even dream journals are being revisited as potential diagnostic aids for neurological conditions. The difference lies in interpretation. Where ancient healers saw wind or phlegm, modern medicine traces biochemical pathways, but both are reading the same signals. The real loss isn't the techniques themselves, but the mindset behind them. These healers didn't just diagnose, they listened to the body's whispers, its rhythms, its silent pleas for balance. In an era of 15-minute doctor visits and over-reliance on imaging, we've traded depth for speed. A machine can spot a tumor, but can it sense the tension in a patient's voice that hints at stress-induced illness? The challenge isn't choosing between tradition and technology, but weaving them together, letting MRI scans coexist with the art of touch, letting lab results speak alongside the stories our bodies have always told. After all, the pulse beneath your wrist still dances to the same ancient rhythm. We've just forgotten how to hear the music. Before hospitals and medical schools, healing was women's work, a quiet revolution carried out in cottage gardens and birthing rooms. Across medieval Europe, villages relied on the local wise woman, who knew which herbs could ease a fever or hasten a labor. These women weren't just healers. They were walking libraries of botanical knowledge, their hands skilled in everything from setting bones to brewing antidotes. A single mother in the Scottish Highlands might pass down a recipe for wound salve made from yarrow and honey, while a midwife in Normandy guarded secrets for turning breech babies with nothing but her palms and whispered prayers. Their expertise wasn't written in leather-bound tomes but etched into memory, shared daughter to daughter like sacred heirlooms. Then came the storm. As universities began formalizing medicine in the 12th century, women were barred from attending, their knowledge suddenly deemed unlearned because it hadn't been stamped by male scholars. The same herbs they'd used for generations appeared in academic texts under Latin names, their origins scrubbed clean of the women who discovered them. Worse still was the witch hunts, a 5-century reign of terror that turned healers into targets, an old woman treating neighbors with comfrey poultices. She might be accused of consorting with demons if a patient died, a midwife easing birth pains with poppy tea. Her remedies became proof of heresy. Historians estimate tens of thousands of women were executed, their wisdom drowned or burned with them. The loss was catastrophic. Take the case of Trota of Salerno, an 11th century physician whose writings on women's health were so advanced they circulated for centuries until male scribes began attributing her work to Trotula, a fictionalized figure stripped of authority. Or consider the fate of the German flower women, whose knowledge of contraceptive herbs like silphium was erased as the church tightened its grip. Even now, we're piecing together fragments of what they knew. A 17th century diary discovered in Devon describes a paste of ground pearl and willow bark that healed ulcers, a formula modern labs confirm has antimicrobial properties. How many more such cures were lost to fear, yet traces survive in unexpected places? The word witch itself may hold a clue. Some scholars argue it derives from wix, Old English for wise one. Folklorists in Appalachia still record ballads about granny women who cured snake bites with plantain leaves, their methods nearly identical to Celtic remedies from 1,000 years prior. In Belarus, elderly women whisper incantations over herbal teas, their words echoing Slavic spells against infection. These threads, though frayed, refuse to snap. The tragedy isn't just the burned manuscripts or silenced voices, it's the centuries of suffering that followed. When male physicians took over childbirth, maternal mortality soared because they dismissed hand-washing as women's superstition, only to later discover its importance. Plants like black cohosh, used by Native American healers for menstrual pain, were mocked until pharmaceutical companies patented synthetic versions. The pattern is clear: suppress the healers, then rebrand their wisdom as innovation. But history has a way of circling back. Today, herbalists and midwives are reclaiming their legacy, not as witches but as guardians of a lineage nearly erased. In a quiet corner of Portugal, a young woman learns her great-grandmother's recipe for St. John's wort oil, its antidepressant properties now confirmed by science. Perhaps the final twist is this: the very institutions that excluded women are now mining their traditions for breakthroughs, proving that wisdom, no matter how violently suppressed, never truly dies. It just waits for the world to catch up. Animal blood, bile, and bones once filled apothecary shelves as prized medicines, each creature offering its own grotesque promise of healing. The Egyptians slathered wounds with crocodile dung, believing its fermenting heat could draw out infection, a logic not entirely absurd, given modern discoveries about antibiotic bacteria in soil. Roman aristocrats sipped powdered vulture skull in wine for migraines, while medieval Europeans paid fortunes for unicorn horn, usually narwhal tusks ground into detoxifying powders. Even the humble earthworm, boiled in oil by Chinese physicians, became a treatment for joint pain centuries before scientists identified its anti-inflammatory enzymes. What's striking isn't just the creativity of these remedies, but how many contained kernels of biological truth. Take leeches, those squirming vampires of the surgical world. Ancient healers from India to Greece used them to balance humors, but today we know their saliva contains harudin, a potent anticoagulant that keeps blood flowing during microsurgeries. Similarly, the Inuit practice of eating raw seal liver, once dismissed as primitive, provided vital vitamin C in climates barren of citrus. Even the Aztecs' use of mashed fireflies for gout makes eerie sense. Modern research shows lucibuphagins in their bodies have strong anti-inflammatory effects. Then there were the remedies that crossed from plausible to perilous. Mummy powder, made from ground-up Egyptian remains, became Europe's must-have drug for centuries, swallowed to treat everything from epilepsy to broken bones. Traders even staged fake mummy excavations to meet demand, mixing bitumen and random corpses. The tragic irony: real mummies sometimes contained lethal mold spores or ancient pathogens. Similarly, bezoar stones, hardened masses from animal guts, were worn as amulets against poison until a 16th century physician tested one on a condemned prisoner and watched the man die in agony. The line between superstition and science often blurred with startling results. Byzantine doctors prescribed swallow's nest broth for infertility, unaware that the nest's high gelatin content could support reproductive health. Mongolian shamans fed wolf hearts to warriors for courage, not knowing the organs-rich coenzyme Q10 might genuinely combat fatigue. These weren't just lucky guesses. They reflected deep observation of animals' behaviors and biology, even if misinterpreted through ancient lenses. Perhaps the most enduring lesson lies in the humility of these practices. When a healer collected spider webs to dress wounds, they were harnessing nature's ready-made gauze, rich with antiseptic properties. When Ayurvedic practitioners used cow urine as a solvent for herbs, they exploited its ammonia content to enhance extraction. Modern medicine often dismisses these methods as crude, yet they embody a principle we're relearning today. Evolution has already crafted countless solutions. The real absurdity isn't that our ancestors used animal parts, it's that we ever stopped looking to nature's pharmacy. Nowhere is this clearer than in the resurgence of maggot therapy. World War I surgeons noticed soldiers whose wounds crawled with larvae healed faster, their infections cleaned by the insect's appetite for dead tissue. Though mocked for decades, sterilized maggots are now FDA approved for diabetic ulcers, outperforming some antibiotics. The cycle is poetic. What was ancient becomes avant-garde. From the leech's bite to the honeybee's venom, now studied for rheumatoid arthritis, these creatures remind us that healing often wears scales, feathers, or chitin, not just a white coat. The market stalls of Renaissance Europe displayed a most macabre commodity: glass jars filled with coarse black powder labeled mummia, their contents scraped from the bandages of Egyptian mummies. Apothecaries swore this macabre dust could mend broken bones, halt internal bleeding, even cure melancholy when mixed into wine. Wealthy patrons paid fortunes for the finest grades, powder tinged with remnants of preserved flesh, believed to hold the strongest life force. The demand grew so voracious that by the 16th century, enterprising merchants staged fake excavations, mixing bitumen and random corpses to meet the insatiable trade. But what drove this obsession with the dead, and why did physicians cling to it for nearly 1,000 years? The answer lies in a perfect storm of ancient myth and medieval logic. Arab physicians of the 9th century first popularized mummia, inspired by Persian legends that bitumen, a tar-like substance found near the Dead Sea, possessed miraculous healing properties. When traders noticed Egyptian mummies were coated in similar black resins, the connection was inevitable. If bitumen cured ailments, surely flesh preserved by it would hold even greater power. The logic spiraled from there. Since mummies survived centuries intact, surely consuming them would transfer that resilience to the living, a fractured leg. Mummia would knit it like the bandages that held mummies together. Headaches, the powdered skull would absorb the pain. Even Shakespeare referenced the trend in Othello, where a handkerchief dyed with mummy symbolizes both medicine and morbid allure. What's chilling is how long science tolerated this delusion. Respected texts like the London Pharmacopoeia listed mummia as a staple remedy until the 18th century. The great surgeon Ambroise Paré, often hailed as a pioneer of modern medicine, initially praised its virtues before condemning it as the futile hope of the credulous. But the real tragedy wasn't just the placebo effect, it was the collateral damage. Genuine mummies, once revered as sacred vessels for the afterlife, were reduced to commodities. A single shipment from Alexandria to Venice in 1580 could contain over 40 human remains, ground into paste without regard for their history. Some mumia even came from recent plague victims, introducing pathogens to unsuspecting patients. The darkest irony, mumia might have occasionally worked, but not for the reasons anyone suspected. Modern analysis reveals some mummies contain tetracycline-producing bacteria, a natural antibiotic that could have accidentally treated infections. Others carried molds like penicillium, hinting at the same lucky accidents that led to penicillin's discovery. The real magic wasn't in the corpses, but in the microbes clinging to them, a twist the grave robbers never imagined. By the 19th century, mumia fell from favor, replaced by quinine and morphine. Yet its ghost lingers in our language. The word mummy itself comes from the Persian mumia, meaning bitumen, a reminder of how myth distorts reality. Today, as archaeologists use CT scans to study mummies without unwrapping them, we've come full circle. From grinding the dead as medicine to protecting them as priceless windows into the past. The story of mumia isn't just about medical desperation. It's a warning about how easily we confuse destruction with discovery, and how often the cure we seek is tangled in the lies we tell ourselves. The deep, resonant hum of a Tibetan monk's throat chant doesn't just fill the air, it vibrates through the body, a physical sensation as much as a sound. For centuries, Himalayan healers have used these multi-layered tones, believing they could realign energy blockages and even mend physical ailments. But this wasn't unique to Tibet. Half a world away, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia crafted didgeridoos, their low-frequency drones used in ceremonies to cleanse illness, while Amazonian shamans chanted icaros, melodic prayers said to dissolve disease like sunlight burning off mist. These traditions shared a startling conviction. Sound wasn't just art or ritual, it was medicine. Modern labs are now catching up to what the ancients knew instinctively. Studies show rhythmic drumming synchronizes brain waves, shifting listeners into theta states, the same frequencies associated with deep meditation and healing. Binaural beats, a technology mimicking the interplay of tones in traditional chanting, have been shown to reduce anxiety and even enhance pain tolerance. But here's the mystery. While we can measure these effects, we've barely scratched the surface of the precise frequencies and combinations these cultures mastered. Take the Sanskrit mantra Om, for example. When chanted correctly, its vibrations resonate at frequencies that modern acousticians note align with the natural harmonics of the earth itself. Coincidence, or was this intentional, a way to tune the human body to the planet's own rhythm? The real intrigue lies in the lost nuances. Greek historian Strabo wrote of the Pythagoreans using specific lyre melodies to soothe mental disturbances, while Egyptian temple inscriptions describe sound chambers where priests sang vowels at precise pitches to activate healing. Neither tradition left sheet music behind. Even more tantalizing are the accounts of Mongolian shamans who could shatter kidney stones with overtone singing, a claim that seems fantastical until you consider modern lithotripsy, which uses sound waves to break stones non-invasively. The difference: today's machines require precise calibration, while the shamans relied on intuition and oral tradition. What's heartbreaking is how much of this sonic wisdom has been muted. The Sami people of Scandinavia once used Joik personalized chants for every individual and ailment, but many were lost during Christianization. Native American peyote songs, believed to guide healing visions, were suppressed for generations. Even Gregorian chant, once a cornerstone of monastic medicine in medieval Europe, was streamlined into uniformity, its original therapeutic variations fading into silence. Yet fragments survive. In a remote Balinese village, healers still sing to rice plants before using them in remedies, insisting the vibrations enhance their potency, a notion modern studies on plant bioacoustics might not dismiss outright. And in a lab at Stanford, researchers are mapping how Tibetan singing bowls trigger the body's relaxation response, quantifying what healers have felt for centuries. That sound doesn't just reach the ears. It travels through bone, through blood, through the very cells themselves. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't in the chants we've preserved, but in the ones we'll never hear again. Somewhere, a melody that once eased fevers or stilled seizures has vanished with the last person who knew its cadence. But the silence left behind whispers a question. If a single frequency could shift pain or alter consciousness, what else might these traditions have known, and what might we still rediscover if we're willing to listen? The pyramids of Giza don't just tower over the desert, they hum with mathematical precision, their angles mirroring the very curvature of the earth. Every stone seems placed by some divine calculator, each ratio echoing the golden mean, that mystical number found in everything from seashells to galaxies. This wasn't just architecture, it was a prayer in geometry, a belief that certain shapes could channel unseen energies to heal both body and spirit. Step inside the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, and you'll stand in a space where sound resonates at frequencies that modern researchers say may stimulate cellular repair. Coincidence, or did the ancients know something about the power of form that we've forgotten? Sacred geometry wasn't confined to Egypt. Across the world, Gothic cathedrals rose like stone hymns, their ribbed vaults and rose windows designed as celestial maps. Chartres Cathedral's labyrinth, walked by pilgrims for centuries, isn't just a path, it's a spiral of sacred ratios believed to induce meditative states. Even the stained glass, arranged in precise fractal patterns, filtered sunlight into colors that medieval monks claimed could illuminate the soul. Modern studies now suggest exposure to certain geometric patterns and light frequencies can reduce stress hormones, hinting that these builders might have been early biohackers, manipulating environment to alter consciousness. Then there are mandalas, those intricate circular designs Tibetan monks painstakingly craft from colored sand. Destroyed after completion, they embody impermanence, but their creation is anything but random. Every line follows ancient geometric rules, with concentric circles and intersecting triangles said to represent cosmic harmony. Neuroscientists studying monks during mandala meditation found brainwaves syncing to theta rhythms, the same states linked to deep healing and creativity. It's as if the shapes themselves act as tuning forks for the mind. The question isn't whether these patterns affect us, but how. Cymatics, the science of visible sound, shows that vibrations arrange matter into geometric forms, suggesting geometry and energy are fundamentally linked. Crop circles, controversial as they are, demonstrate how electromagnetic fields can bend plants into perfect fractals overnight. Even water molecules, when exposed to sacred shapes like the flower of life, form crystalline structures under microscopes, while chaotic environments produce malformed blobs. If geometry can order something as basic as water, what might it do to the human body, which is 60% fluid? Yet the most tantalizing clues lie in the gaps. The Vedas describe yantras, geometric diagrams that allegedly manifest desires when meditated upon. Amazonian shamans speak of Ayahuasca visions, revealing healing grids woven into the fabric of reality. Are these metaphors or glimpses of a hidden architecture underlying health itself? Modern frequency medicine experiments with tetrahedral chambers and Fibonacci-based devices, reporting accelerated wound healing, though skeptics dismiss it as placebo. But when a 13th century cathedral and a 21st century lab both point to the same possibility, it's worth asking, did the ancients see a roadmap to wellness written in the language of shapes, one we're only now beginning to decode. Perhaps the answer lies not in choosing between science and mysticism, but in recognizing that sacred geometry was their science. A rose window's petals, a pyramid slope, a mandala spiral, these weren't just art. They were equations, encoded invitations to step into alignment with forces older than stone, older than time, and somewhere between the precision of our microscopes and the poetry of their temples, the truth hums, waiting to be heard. The rise of modern medicine didn't just bring breakthroughs, it fractured a vision of health that had endured for millennia. Picture an Ayurvedic healer in ancient India, diagnosing a fever not just by the heat of the skin, but by the glint in the patient's eyes, the rhythm of their speech, even the way they carried grief in their shoulders. Or a Tang dynasty physician in China, prescribing herbs not just for a cough, but to rebalance the entire ecosystem of the body, from the lungs to the emotions they housed. These systems saw illness as a ripple in a vast interconnected web, where a sore joint might stem from stagnant liver energy, or a rash could signal unresolved sorrow. Fast forward to today, and we've sliced the body into neat specialties: cardiology, dermatology, psychiatry, as if the heart knows nothing of the skin, and the mind exists in some separate, sterile chamber. The consequences of this divide are etched into our modern health crises. Chronic diseases like diabetes and autoimmune disorders aren't just biochemical malfunctions. They are often rooted in the very disconnection ancient healers warned against. Stress, that silent predator of the adrenal glands, doesn't just cause insomnia. It rewires digestion, weakens immunity, and even alters gene expression. Yet how often does a gastroenterologist ask about a patient's stress levels when treating irritable bowel syndrome, or an oncologist explore the emotional landscape that might have preceded a diagnosis? The stats are telling. Countries with the most advanced medical technology also report skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, and inflammation-linked illnesses. Coincidence, or the price of treating symptoms while ignoring the symphony of causes? What's lost isn't just a set of techniques, but an entire philosophy. Traditional Chinese medicine teaches that the liver governs not just detoxification, but the smooth flow of emotions, hence the phrase, feeling liver fire for anger. Ayurveda links the colon to stored fear and the heart to unmet longing. These weren't poetic metaphors, they were clinical observations passed down through generations. Compare that to a modern hospital where a psychiatrist prescribes antidepressants without considering gut health, despite mounting evidence that serotonin is largely produced in the intestines. Or where a rheumatologist treats rheumatoid arthritis with immune suppressants, never addressing the trauma studies now linked to autoimmune flare-ups. The ancients would have gasped at such compartmentalization, not because their methods were primitive, but because they recognized a truth we're still struggling to relearn. The body keeps score in ways no single specialist can tally alone. Yet glimmers of reintegration are emerging. Functional medicine, a growing field, chases root causes across systems, asking why a thyroid disorder might relate to gut bacteria, or why migraines could stem from mitochondrial dysfunction. Psychoneuroimmunology maps the highways between stress hormones and immune cells, validating what Ayurveda called the mind-body bridge. Even hospital design is shifting, with studies showing patients recover faster in rooms with natural light and greenery, echoing the ancient belief that healing spaces must nourish the spirit as much as the flesh. The real tragedy isn't that we abandoned holistic healing, but that we dismissed it as unscientific before understanding its sophistication. When a study confirms that acupuncture reduces inflammation by triggering the vagus nerve, or that meditation slows cellular aging, we're not discovering new truths, we're catching up to old ones. The question isn't whether we can return to the past, but whether we're brave enough to merge its wisdom with our tools, to see health not as a machine to fix, but as a garden to tend, where every weed pulled reveals another thread in the vast, invisible tapestry of wellness. The laboratory doors are swinging open to remedies once dismissed as folklore, not with skepticism, but with excitement. Turmeric, that golden root Ayurvedic healers ground into paste for joint pain, now fills peer-reviewed journals. Scientists have isolated curcumin, its active compound, and discovered it blocks inflammatory pathways as effectively as some pharmaceuticals, yet without the harsh side effects. Frankincense, burned in temples since the time of the pharaohs, reveals secrets in its resin, boswellic acids that may slow cartilage degeneration in arthritis. Even the humble pomegranate, revered in ancient Persia as a symbol of immortality, shows promise in clinical trials for heart health, its polyphenols scrubbing arteries clean like nature's own stent. But the real shockwave comes from psychedelics. Psilocybin, the magic in sacred mushrooms used by Aztec shamans for vision quests, is now administered in sterile therapy rooms to treat depression. Ketamine, derived from a compound first synthesized in the 1960s but echoing the dissociative state sought in Siberian spirit journeys, resets suicidal ideation in hours, not weeks. The parallels are uncanny. Indigenous rituals involved careful dosing, guided sessions, and integration, mirroring the set and setting protocols of modern psychedelic-assisted therapy. The difference: science now measures what healers once intuited. Brain scans show psilocybin dissolving the rigid neural networks of trauma, while fMRI studies capture the moment ketamine reignites the brain's growth factors like rain on parched soil. This isn't just rediscovery, it's collaboration. In the Amazon, ethnobotanists work alongside shamans, recording plant knowledge before it vanishes. A single vine might yield a molecule for Parkinson's, but only if harvested at the new moon, as elders insist. Pharmaceutical companies, once notorious for biopiracy, now fund indigenous-led research, recognizing that the recipe matters as much as the ingredient. The result: drugs like galantamine, derived from snowdrop bulbs used in Balkan folk medicine, now slow Alzheimer's progression, yet challenges remain. Patent battles erupt over who owns traditional knowledge. A Moroccan herbalist's anti-diabetic formula becomes a billion-dollar drug, while her village sees no royalties. And some wisdom resists lab translation. How do you quantify the healing power of a Navajo chant, or replicate the precision of a pulse diagnosis that senses illness before symptoms appear? The future may lie in hybrid models, hospitals with acupuncture alongside MRI machines, or clinical trials that measure not just biomarkers, but shifts in what Ayurveda calls prana, or TCM terms, Kai. The Renaissance isn't about abandoning modernity for nostalgia. It's about humility, recognizing that the ancients mapped territories of healing we're only now learning to navigate. When a cancer patient finds relief in both immunotherapy and mistletoe extracts long used in European folk medicine to starve tumors, or when a veteran's PTSD lifts after MDMA therapy, a molecule first synthesized in a lab, yet evoking the communal catharsis of ancient rites, we glimpse a world where healing isn't divided into old and new, but unified by what works. The real breakthrough won't be a pill or a protocol, but a paradigm shift, remembering that the body speaks in dialects older than science, and true medicine listens in all of them. A yoga studio in Los Angeles charges $200 per class, its walls lined with Sanskrit symbols stripped of their sacred meaning. A wellness influencer smudges her apartment with white sage, a practice central to Native American ceremonies, while scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the tribes now struggling to find enough sage for their own rituals. These scenes sit at the heart of a modern dilemma, as ancient healing traditions flood mainstream culture. Who gets to profit from them, and at what cost? The issue isn't just about borrowing, it's about power. When corporations patent turmeric formulations or celebrities trademark spiritual terms like namaste, they're not honoring traditions, they're mining them for profit, often while the cultures that birthed these practices fight for basic recognition. The tension plays out in stark contrasts. In India, where yoga originated as a spiritual discipline intertwined with Hinduism, many practitioners watch uneasily as Western studios reduce it to stretching with chanting. Meanwhile, in North America, indigenous communities have seen white sage, once used sparingly in purification rites, harvested to near extinction by commercial vendors. The harm isn't just ecological, it's existential. When sacred rituals become Instagram trends, their deeper meanings evaporate, leaving behind hollow aesthetics. Imagine if someone turned communion wafers into gluten-free snacks or sold baptism water as artisanal mineral spray. The outrage would be instant. Yet for many indigenous traditions, this exploitation has been the norm for centuries. But the solution isn't gatekeeping, it's reciprocity. Consider how the Hawaiian practice of lama lomi massage has entered global spas. In ethical models, practitioners train under native Hawaiian masters, pay licensing fees that fund cultural preservation, and educate clients about the tradition's roots. Contrast this with Ayahuasca tourism, where travelers flock to the Amazon for quick psychedelic experiences, often with faux shamans who bastardize ceremonies. The difference lies in respect. One approach builds bridges, the other bulldozes history. The way forward demands nuance. Boycotting all cultural exchange isn't the answer. Isolation can suffocate living traditions. But mindless appropriation isn't inevitable. Before adopting a practice, ask who originated this. Are they thriving or marginalized? Can I engage in a way that gives back? When a Navajo herbalist shares a tea recipe, buying directly from her community's coop honors the source. When a Japanese Reiki master teaches the original Usui method, not some westernized shortcut, the lineage stays intact. Healing traditions are not commodities, they're living legacies. The line between appreciation and theft blurs when we forget that behind every remedy, every chant, every ritual, there are people who safeguarded this wisdom through persecution and erasure. To truly honor these gifts, we must move beyond consumption and into connection, recognizing that the greatest healing happens not when we take, but when we listen. Our journey through these ancient healing traditions isn't just a look backward, it's a bridge between worlds. Each remedy, each ritual we've uncovered shows us something profound, that our ancestors weren't primitive guessers, but keen observers who understood the delicate dance between humanity and the natural world. Take the Egyptian use of honey on wounds, a practice dismissed for centuries as folk medicine until modern labs confirmed its powerful antibacterial properties. Or consider how acupuncture's meridian system, once mocked as imaginary pathways, now finds validation in studies showing how needle stimulation triggers measurable neural responses. These aren't lucky accidents. They're evidence of sophisticated systems developed through generations of trial, reverence, and deep listening to the body's whispers. What's most striking isn't just how much they got right, but how holistic their vision of health truly was. Where modern medicine often treats symptoms in isolation, ancient healers saw the whole person, body, mind, and spirit woven together. An Ayurvedic physician wouldn't just prescribe turmeric for inflammation. They'd examine digestion, sleep patterns, even the quality of one's relationships, understanding that true healing requires harmony on every level. Similarly, a Greek patient sleeping in Asclepius's temple wasn't merely dreaming, they were engaging in what we'd now call psychosomatic medicine, allowing their subconscious to reveal root causes science is only beginning to map. Yet for all we've rediscovered, so much remains tantalizingly out of reach. The Library of Alexandria's burned scrolls might have held early cancer treatments. The Amazonian shamans who took plant knowledge to their graves could have carried cures for diseases that plague us today. Even the cryptic symbols in alchemical texts may encode chemical processes we're still struggling to replicate. The real tragedy isn't just the loss of these remedies, but the loss of the mindset that created them. One that saw medicine as an art as much as a science, where intuition and observation walked hand in hand. But here's the hopeful part, the story isn't over. In Himalayan monasteries, elders still memorize formulas passed down through oral tradition. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal healers sing to plants before harvesting, maintaining a connection modern labs are only starting to quantify. Every time a researcher tests an ancient remedy and finds active compounds, or a doctor combines acupuncture with physical therapy, we're not just reviving the past, we're rebuilding a conversation that should never have been interrupted. Perhaps the greatest lesson these traditions offer is humility. They remind us that healing isn't about conquering nature, but collaborating with it. That sometimes the most advanced technology is a listening hand on a pulse, or the patience to watch how a flower blooms at dawn. As we stand between the wisdom of ages and the promise of tomorrow, one truth becomes clear. The future of medicine might not lie in forgetting the past, but in finally understanding it. So the next time you sip chamomile tea or rub arnica on a bruise, remember, you're part of an unbroken chain of seekers, stretching back to the very first healer who ever looked at a leaf and wondered, what